Welcome back to Nightshade Tales Top 10, Number 1. A Tales quiet hotel nestled in the heart of the Swiss Alps. The young couple had planned the perfect vacation, far away from the noise of the city, seeking rest and relaxation. However, on their second night, things took a strange turn. It started with a faint knocking on the door, though they were alone in their room. When they opened it, no one was there. After a while, they brushed it off, but then they began to hear strange whispers as if someone was talking behind the walls. That night, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, so they decided to investigate. They discovered an old hidden room behind a bookshelf that led to a dusty, forgotten hallway. At the end of it was a mirror, ancient and cracked. They stared into it, only to see shadowy figures moving in the reflection, figures that weren't in the room with them. Horrified, they fled. But when they mentioned it to the hotel staff, they were told that the room had been sealed for decades. Who or what was watching them that night? Could they have been haunted by something from the past? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 2, we headed to a remote beach resort in Thailand, where a group of friends thought they were in for a relaxing vacation. On their first day, they met a stranger at the local market, a man who looked just as out of place as they did. He struck up a conversation and shared strange stories about the island, stories of a forgotten village deep in the jungle where the spirits of the past still lingered. Intrigued, the group decided to visit the village the next day. But when they tried to find it, they couldn't. No one seemed to know where it was. Desperate, they asked around, but even the locals were unfamiliar with the place. That evening, they returned to the market to ask the man for more details, only to find that no one knew who he was. The stranger had completely vanished. No trace of him existed. Was he a ghost or something else entirely? Let me know what you think. Could he have been guiding them from beyond the grave? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 3. Let's take a trip to a remote cabin in the woods of northern Canada, where a family of 4 thought they had found the perfect getaway. The first few days were peaceful, just the sound of nature and the crackle of their campfire. But on the second night, things took a terrifying turn. They heard what sounded like scratching at the door, slow and deliberate. Thinking it was an animal, they ignored it, but when the scratching grew louder and more frantic, they hesitated. One family member finally opened the door, but there was nothing there, just the empty forest bathed in moonlight. The next morning, they discovered massive human-like footprints around the cabin, though they were the only ones in the area. That evening, they noticed something strange. In one of the cabin's mirrors, they saw a reflection of the family, except one person was missing. Who or what had been watching them, and what did that missing reflection mean? Would you have stayed the night after this? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 4. A solo traveller seeking adventure booked a stay at a secluded resort in the Caribbean. Everything seemed perfect at first: gorgeous beaches, beautiful weather, and luxury accommodations. But as the days passed, the traveller began to notice something strange. No other guests. The resort was eerily quiet, and the staff seemed to be the only people there. Desperate for human interaction, the traveller asked where the other guests were, but the staff gave vague answers, saying they were just around. It wasn't until the traveller went to check out that things got really weird. The front desk refused to provide a receipt. When the traveller insisted, they were told that they had never stayed there. Looking back from the beach, the resort had vanished, completely gone. No trace of the place remained. Had the traveller been in some kind of dream or alternate reality? What do you think happened here? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 5. Imagine this. You're travelling through Europe on a night train, heading from Paris to Rome. You're exhausted, so you try to rest, but then a strange man sits across from you. He seems friendly enough at first, but there's something off about him. As the conversation progresses, he begins to share unsettling details about your life. Things no stranger could possibly know. When you ask him how he knows, he simply smiles and says, "I've been watching you." The hairs on the back of your neck stand up, but before you can move, the train seems to slow down, far longer than it should have. When the train arrives at its destination, the man is gone. There's no sign of him anywhere. Was this a supernatural encounter, or was the man just a very skilled stalker? Let me know what you think in the comment. Number 6. A pair of friends decided to take a boat out to a small uninhabited island off the coast of Greece. The day was perfect, the water crystal clear, and the sun shining brightly. But as night fell, the island grew unnervingly quiet. While walking along the beach, they heard strange guttural noises coming from the trees, but when they investigated, there was no one there. Things got even weirder when they discovered old, faded photographs of people who seemed to belong to a different era, perhaps even the 1800s. When they returned to their boat to leave, they noticed that the boat seemed further out than they remembered it being. Desperate to get back to the mainland, they finally left. But when they told the locals about the island, no one had ever heard of it before. Could it have been a haunted island? Or had they stumbled into something far darker? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 7. This next story will make you question the reality of what you see. A couple decided to visit a secluded beach in Mexico. The beach was private, isolated, and beautiful. The perfect getaway. However, when they returned to their hotel later that evening, something was off. No one seemed to know what beach they were talking about. When they asked the hotel staff, they were told the beach didn't exist. Confused and unsettled, they went back to the spot where they had spent the day. There was nothing there, no sand, no water, just empty land. When they asked the locals, no one had ever heard of it. Was the beach part of a disappearing act? Or had they encountered a time slip? What do you think happened here? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 8. On a safari in South Africa, a family decided to stay in a remote lodge deep in the savannah. Things seemed perfect, until the first night when they heard strange footsteps outside their tent. At first they thought it was an animal, but the sound was too deliberate, too close. When they opened the tent, nothing was there. But the footsteps continued that night, growing louder. The next morning, the lodge manager told them that previous guests had disappeared in similar circumstances, but the staff had never been able to explain what happened. Was it a wild animal? Or something darker that haunted the lodge? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 9. A solo traveller rented an apartment in New York City for a month-long vacation. Everything seemed great, but soon after moving in, she noticed that her personal belongings were being moved around. Items would disappear only to reappear later. One day, she found a note in the kitchen that she didn't recognize. In fact, the handwriting didn't belong to her. Disturbed, she tried to confront the landlord, but they were just as baffled. Eventually, she realized something chilling. She wasn't alone. A previous tenant, who was believed to have moved out years ago, seemed to have never really left. Was her apartment haunted by a former tenant, or was she sharing space with a spirit? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 10. A group of tourists on a jungle trek in Indonesia hired a local guide to show them ancient temples deep in the forest. The guide's stories were strange, filled with warnings of spirits and dangers hidden in the jungle. The group thought it was all just local folklore, until night fell. At the camp, the guide disappeared without a trace. Panic set in as they realized he was gone, but they couldn't find any sign of him. The next morning, the locals told them that the guide had died years earlier in the jungle. Could they have been guided by a ghost, or was it just a strange coincidence? Let me know what you think in the comments.